It's finally happened as the Toronto Maple Leafs are making moves as they have made multiple signings, including signing Max Pacioretty, Steven Lorentz, and more. We're going to break down those signings, discuss what they mean going forward, as well as discuss the other moves that are now imminent as we approach the 5 p.m. deadline for the Toronto Maple Leafs to get under the cap. So I'm going to break all that down on this episode. But before we do, quick reminder to hit the subscribe button. If you're a part of the 70 or so percent who aren't subscribed to the channel, it would mean the world if you'd hit that button. Thank you guys for your continued support, and we're on the road now to 14,000 subscribers. But we have a lot to go over today. It's finally happened. Today is the day that moves are going down, and this morning the Leafs have made multiple, but there are more to come later today as they continue to finalize their roster. But let's just dive right into it. So we can start with this. Max Pacioretty, he did sign the deal we were all waiting for him to sign. So it is a one-year deal as expected. The cap hit is $873,000, and a lot of it is performance based. You can see here the total comp is $1.5 million. He has his base salary, and he has performance bonuses at 10 games played and 35 games played. Now, this obviously helps with the cap hit a little bit by getting only $873,000 as his base, but Max Pacioretty is a guy that we've obviously been discussing for a while now. I've been on the train of Max Pacioretty before he even signed with the Leafs way back a month or two ago, but he is locked in now with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and again, they made multiple signings here, and there's a lot of implications that this has, but surrounding Max Pacioretty, super interesting player. Obviously, we saw him in preseason. He had a very good first preseason game where he put up 2 goals. Since then, he's been a little bit quiet, but he is a veteran guy. He's been around forever, and quite frankly, he's not going to take too much into preseason. We can't take too much out of it, whether he plays great or bad. They were going to sign Max Pacioretty either way. When they signed him to the PTO, they basically said and guaranteed him a spot on the opening night roster. And now at this point, it seems like he is going to make definitely the opening night roster. He's probably going to be manning that third line when they play the Montreal Canadiens in 2 days' time. And I like the contract. It's a very good deal. Like we expected, a pretty low cap hit here. Nothing crazy. It's not like it was a $3 or $4 million deal. It's a $1.5 million deal in total comp. And really, he should hit the 10 and 35 game threshold. It's just a way for them to pay a little bit less base salary on that. I don't see a world where he doesn't play 35 games. I mean, maybe if he has a really poor performance starting the year, he doesn't hit the 35 games played, but he should hit that with relative ease. You can look at his stats here again. He had a decent year last year. He had 4 goals, but ultimately he's been riddled with injuries for the past little bit. We know he's come out and said that he's as healthy as he's ever felt over the past handful of seasons. Obviously, he had those prime years with the Montreal Canadiens, but at this point, he says he's feeling better than ever. He looks healthier than ever. You can see him skating on the ice. He's looking phenomenal. So I think at this point, this is going to be a pretty good signing for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and you can't really go wrong with this cap hit. And again, he's going to be a third liner, maybe a fourth liner. I'm sure there's times with injuries and things like that he might step up to the second line, but he's going to spend most of his time on that third line, and it's going to be a very interesting fit, and I'm curious and excited to see on opening night how it all works out. But speaking of good fits, you have Steven Lorentz. We were waiting for them to sign him to a contract. They obviously signed him to a PTO, and we were hoping, and Steven Lorentz came out and said after his last preseason game that he's done everything he could in his ability to earn a contract at the NHL level, and he did indeed do just that. So he's agreed to a 1-year deal at $775,000, so another very low cap hit deal. And Steven Lorentz is a very nice story. Obviously played with the Cup-winning Panthers last season, and now he came over to the Toronto Maple Leafs. He said it's always been a dream of his to play with the Leafs, and then he performed very well in the preseason. We saw even in the last preseason game how he really just shined. And again, he's not going to be a guy who puts up 30 goals or anything like that, but he is a guy who's going to be able to go ahead and provide some depth and provide some structure to his team, because we know that last season the third and fourth line was filled with a bunch of guys that were good, but their roles weren't super defined, and that ultimately hurt them in the playoffs. It hurt them when, even the regular season to a degree. We know they got off to a super slow start last year, and then ultimately they came back and did fine in the playoffs, or not in the playoffs, in the regular season they did horrific in the playoffs, and they lost to the Bruins. But again, $775,000 for Steven Lorentz, and again, Max Pacioretty has bonuses that can reach up to $600K, and Toronto is squeezing to maximize its cap space. And this is the interesting thing here. You can see from Freeman, the 1-year deals are at 873 and 775. So now the question turns to, and obviously Steven Lorentz is going to make the opening night roster. He'll probably man the fourth line, definitely will, similar to what we saw in the preseason. He's going to be a very good pairing to whoever is on the fourth line. Seems maybe Lorentz, David Kempf, and then Ryan Reeves might man the opening night roster, or the opening night lineup. But there's a bunch of different ways this could transition here. But again, Very interesting deal for Lorentz. I'm very happy for him, and I'm happy that the Leafs are making this happen. But the question now is more moves are to come in the sense of they do not have their roster finalized yet. There's a few ways they can go about it. But they also, and this is something that flew under the radar, they did sign Cade Weber to a 2-year extension carrying $825,000 AAV at the NHL level. So it's a 2-year deal that becomes a one-way deal in 2026, 2027. So hopefully by then he's ready to play for the NHL, the Toronto Maple Leafs team. But in the meantime, he is on a 2-year deal now, which is very exciting. I mean, Cade Weber is a very interesting player. It's a 2-year deal for 2025, 2026, meaning he can go down between the Marlies and the Toronto Maple Leafs. So Cade Weber, very good defenseman. He's it's gonna be an interesting guy. He needs to develop. We saw that he hasn't played a ton. He didn't play at all in the preseason, so he needs to develop and get to that point where he's gonna be hopefully a staple in the Toronto Maple Leafs blue line going forward. But here, this is what comes out from Kyle Cushman. Now, here's the interesting thing. With all these moves these moves haven't happened yet. They're going to happen at some point before the 5 p.m. deadline. They are currently in an interesting spot because they need to make cap space in order to sign both of these guys. So they're cap compliant by $1 with all these moves after signing Pacioretty and Lorentz. So these are the moves that would have to happen. Send down Cowan, put Minton on the SOIR, you injury reserve Dewar, and you put on the LTIR Yarncroc, Hakanpää, and Mermis. Now, these have yet to be finalized, but we have some kind of insight on this. So in order for this to happen, everything here seems good. It's really a matter of what they want to do with Easton Cowan, because we've been on the fence the whole time about how they should. I mean, we figured they were going to play Easton Cowan for its 8 or 9 games to not, to manipulate the service time a little bit, then send him down to the OHL because he can't play with the Marlies in the AHL. He has to play in the OHL. But it seems like they're going to send him down in order to make the $1 cap hit. Now, this tweet is worded as if these moves have happened, but these are the moves that are most likely to happen. They haven't been finalized yet. However, the only one that stood out to me and that stood out to me yesterday was LTIR and Cal Yarncroc. He seemed to be okay. They said the injury wasn't serious. However, this just dropped, and that is that Cal Yarncroc is absent from Maple Leafs practice as of 4 minutes ago. Veteran has been dealing with nagging lower body injury during training camp. And as expected, Kyle Cushman said Yarncroc is likely the LTIR candidate to start the season based on the cap structure right now. He'd miss at least 10 games because if you're put on the LTIR, you need to be, you can't return until November 1st at the earliest. So it seems like what the Maple Leafs are going to be doing here, in all likelihood, are these moves. They're going to LTIR Yarncroc, Hakanpää, and Mermis. That means that Yarncroc and Hakanpää can't play for the first 10 games of the season, and they're going to also most likely send down Easton Cowan. And what that does is put them within the cap, under the cap by $1, and puts them cap compliant by $1. So it's super interesting now at this point. These moves aren't finalized. We will have another video once the moves are finalized, and Darius will be there for that one. We assume that this is what's going to happen. That still leaves up in the air the question mark for Timothy Liljegren going forward, because it seems like they're going to keep Connor Timmins, which means that in all likelihood, Connor Timmins is going to be on the opening night roster instead of Timothy Liljegren. So there's a bunch of different subsequent moves here that are happening, but it seems like in all likelihood that a bunch of guys are going to be sent down, especially Easton Cowan. He's probably not going to make his Leafs debut at the start of this year, at least, probably bearing injuries. He will make it at some point, but let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are on this. Once these moves are finalized over the next few hours, we will have a video breaking it down for you. But what we do know is that they've signed Pacioretty, they signed Steven Lorentz, and they've also signed not Ben Danford, but Cade Weber. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. We'll see you soon.